Meredith Lane did not raise her voice, and somehow that made it worse. She stood at the head of the 38th floor conference room of Lane Construction, a white female chief executive officer in a charcoal suit, with the skyline of Chicago shining behind her and 12 executives watching from both sides of the glass table. On the wall screen, one red number glared over everyone like a warning light: $50 million. Andrew Scott stood near the end of the table with his worn leather folder pressed against his chest, his employee badge still clipped to his belt, and his 9-year-old daughter Chloe sitting on a side chair behind him with a school notebook on her knees and a phone in her hand. He had not planned to bring her. Her elementary school had released early because of a water line repair, and the meeting had been called with 20 minutes of notice. He had told the front desk he would keep her quiet. He had told Chloe to finish her math worksheet and not worry about grown-up business. But now every grown-up in the room was staring at her father like he had set fire to the company. Senior partner Greg Holt leaned back in his chair with a neat silver tie, polished shoes, and the calm smile of a man who had already chosen where the blame would land. Greg tapped the printed cost sheet with 2 fingers and said, "This is not a rounding issue, Meredith. This is not a clerical issue. This is a catastrophic estimating failure," and Andrew Scott signed his name to it. Andrew looked at the paper, then at the screen, then back at Meredith. "That is not my final estimate," he said. His voice was steady, but Chloe heard the strain inside it. "My submitted number was 26% lower. The steel package, crane rental, and subcontractor markup were changed after my upload." Greg gave a soft laugh. "Changed after your upload. That is convenient." A few people shifted in their chairs. Someone near the finance team looked down. Meredith did not. She kept her eyes on Andrew, sharp and disappointed. "Mr. Scott, we are talking about a civic center project that affects public funding, lender confidence, union scheduling, and hundreds of jobs. You expect me to believe a senior partner altered your estimate and left your name on it?" Andrew swallowed. "I expect you to check the audit trail." "We did check enough," Greg said quickly. "Your credentials are on the file." Chloe stopped writing. Her pencil rested across the word division in her notebook. Her phone lay beside it, screen dim but still active. 10 minutes earlier, she had opened a voice note to record herself reading a paragraph for school because her teacher said practicing aloud helped with fluency. When Greg stormed past her chair before the meeting began, talking into his own phone near the hallway, Chloe had frozen. She had not known if she was allowed to move. She had not known if she should stop recording. So the phone kept listening. It had caught the muffled elevator bell, the squeak of Greg's dress shoes, and words Chloe did not fully understand. "Scott will take the fall. Poor single father. No lawyer. No leverage." Now that same phone sat under her small hand while her father was being judged by people in suits. Meredith turned slightly toward Chloe, and Andrew saw it. His face changed at once. "Please," he said, softer now. "My daughter does not need to hear this." Greg smiled wider. Maybe she should. Maybe she should learn what happens when adults make $50 million mistakes. Chloe's cheeks went red. Andrew stepped half a pace in front of her chair, not blocking anyone, just shielding her with the only thing he had, his body and his dignity. "Do not use my child to make your point," he said. The room went colder. Meredith's jaw tightened. "Mr. Scott, this is my company. This is my meeting, and I will decide what point needs to be made." Andrew looked at her, stunned less by the words than by the certainty behind them. He had respected Meredith Lane from a distance. Everyone in regional construction knew her story. She ran hard projects, handled impossible deadlines, and could read a balance sheet like a road map. But today she was reading him like a stereotype. Single father, modest salary, no corner office, no powerful friends, easy to doubt. "I am asking for a forensic review," Andrew said. "The cost escalation is hidden in the sub." Andrew did not listen to the elevator music on the way down. He heard only Chloe's whisper, small and shaking beside him. "What if I have proof?" Her phone was still in her hand, the screen dimmed now, the little voice note saved under a plain gray file name with the date and time. Andrew looked at it for one breath too long, then gently closed Chloe's fingers around it. "Not here," he said. "Not in this building." The lobby of Lane Construction stretched around them like a museum built for people who never worried about rent. White marble floors, tall windows, a coffee bar where one small latte cost almost as much as Chloe's school lunch for a week. Andrew walked past the security desk with his cardboard box of personal things. Not much for 6 years of work. A cracked tape measure, 2 highlighters, a calculator, 3 project notebooks, a framed photo of Chloe missing one front tooth, and a stack of printed cost reports with sticky notes along the edges. Nobody stopped him. Nobody apologized. Outside, the Chicago wind cut between the buildings and lifted the loose corners of Chloe's school worksheet. Andrew tucked the papers back into her notebook and held it flat against his coat. "Dad?" she asked. "Are we in trouble?" He wanted to say no fast, the way parents do when fear is already in the room. But Andrew Scott had raised his daughter on small, honest answers. He crouched beside her near the curb while people in suits moved around them like water around a stone. "We are going to have a hard week," he said. "Maybe more than a week. But hard is not the same as hopeless." Chloe nodded, though her eyes were wet. He took her phone and looked once more at the saved voice note. He did not press play. Not there. Not with cameras in the lobby, traffic noise on the street, and his daughter's name attached to something grown people would try to crush if they knew about it too soon. He gave the phone back. "Keep it charged. Do not delete anything. Do not send it to anyone. Not to your friends. Not to your teacher. Not even to me until we are home and I can make a clean copy." Chloe held the phone against her school notebook like both things had become one object, half childhood, half evidence. On the bus home, Andrew stood because every seat was full. Chloe sat beside an older woman with grocery bags and kept her backpack on her lap. Andrew's work shoes hurt his feet. They were not expensive shoes, just black leather he polished every Sunday night so they would last another year. His phone buzzed 3 times. One message from Human Resources. Access suspended pending review. One from payroll, final hours to be confirmed. One from his landlord. Reminder, rent due Friday by 5 in the afternoon. Andrew turned the screen over in his palm and looked out at the storefronts sliding by. Rent was $1,875 a month for their 2-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor of an old brick building with thin walls and a radiator that knocked like someone tapping from inside the pipes. The electric bill was due next Tuesday. Chloe's after-school program had sent a notice about late payment. The grocery card in his wallet had $32 left. None of those numbers scared him more than the look on Chloe's face when Meredith Lane had said his mistake could cost hundreds of jobs. When they reached their neighborhood, Andrew bought a small carton of milk, a loaf of bread, and a bag of apples from the corner store. He counted the change before the cashier handed him the receipt. Chloe noticed. She always noticed. "We can skip Pizza Friday," she said. "I like grilled cheese better." Andrew smiled because it would have hurt her more if he looked sad. "Pizza Friday is not canceled," he said. "It is under financial review." She gave a tiny laugh, the first one since the glass room. Their apartment smelled like laundry soap, pencil shavings, and the tomato soup Andrew had made the night before. On the refrigerator, bills were clipped under a magnet shaped like a yellow school bus. Rent, utilities, internet, health clinic balance, school picture order form, unchecked. Beside them was Chloe's spelling list and a note Andrew had written in black marker. "Numbers tell the truth. Check twice. Speak once." Chloe put her school notebook on the kitchen table and set her phone beside it like a fragile glass. Andrew washed his hands, loosened his tie, and pulled out a chair. He did not open the laptop right away. First came the routine, because routine was how a single father kept the world from swallowing a child whole. Backpack emptied. Lunchbox rinsed. Homework folder checked. Permission slip signed. Apple sliced. A glass of milk poured. Chloe watched him move through each small task with the careful rhythm of a man who could not afford to forget anything. "Are you still my estimator, Dad?" she asked. Andrew paused at the sink. "Yes. Even if they took your badge?" He dried his hands on a towel. "A badge lets you into a building. It does not make you good at your work." Chloe opened her notebook. Her math page was wrinkled from the bus ride. Long division on top. A vocabulary paragraph on the bottom. In the margin, she had drawn a tiny phone with sound waves coming out of it. Andrew saw it, but did not comment. He sat across from her, opened his own old project notebook, and began writing down everything he remembered from the meeting. Time called. People present. Exact words he could recall. File name shown on screen. Cost categories questioned. Steel package. Crane rental. Subcontractor markup. Contingency line. He wrote slowly, not because he was unsure, but because he believed clean records mattered when powerful people tried to make a messy lie look official. Chloe watched his pen move. Why do you write everything? Because memory gets tired, Andrew said. Paper does not. She looked at her phone. Phones remember too. Andrew's pen stopped. The apartment felt very quiet. A siren passed somewhere far down the avenue, then faded. He reached for his laptop, an old silver one with a missing rubber foot, and plugged it in at the kitchen counter. All right, he said gently. We are going to handle this the right way. Chloe pushed the phone toward him. He did not take it until she nodded. Then he placed it on the table between them and opened the voice recorder app. The file was there. 28 minutes and 16 seconds. Long enough to hold a hallway, a conference room, a lie, and a little girl breathing too softly because she had been afraid to make a sound. Andrew connected the phone to the laptop with a white charging cord that had been taped near the end. He copied the file once to the computer, once to a small external drive from his work bag, and once to a private cloud folder with the original date and time untouched. He did not trim it. He did not rename it with angry words. He labeled the copy only, Chloe phone voice note original. Then he closed the laptop halfway and looked at his daughter. This is important, he said. But you are more important than this file. If anyone asks you questions, you tell me first. You do not have to be brave for grown-ups who failed to be fair. Chloe nodded, but her chin lifted. I wanted to be brave for you. Andrew looked away for a second, because some kinds of love could break a person open without making a sound. You already are, he said. Then he stood and made grilled cheese in a scratched pan while Chloe finished her division problems. The bills stayed on the refrigerator. The rent reminder stayed on his phone. His badge stayed in the cardboard box by the door. But on the kitchen table, beside a child's school notebook and a sharpened yellow pencil, a quiet voice note waited with a truth that nobody at Lane Construction knew was still alive. By 7:15 the next morning, Meredith Lane was already standing in the executive conference room with a paper cup of black coffee gone cold in her hand and a wall of bad news in front of her. Lane Construction had built hospitals, airport terminals, school additions, and municipal buildings across Illinois for 3 decades, but one civic center project was now heavy enough to bend the whole company. The project map covered the glass wall in blue lines and red circles. The job site was 16 acres on the west side of the city, with 2 cranes scheduled, 8 subcontractor packages open, a public bond deadline approaching, and a bank review set for noon. The number on the crisis report had not changed overnight. $50 million. Not a small overrun. Not a rounding error. Not a normal market adjustment. A number that could scare a lender, embarrass a mayor, freeze a project, and make every board member in the room start protecting themselves. Meredith wore a navy suit and low heels, her blonde hair pulled back cleanly, her face calm because a chief executive officer did not get the luxury of looking frightened before breakfast. Around her sat the people who lived at the top of the company: legal counsel, finance directors, operations managers, risk officers, and senior partner Greg Holt at her right hand with a leather portfolio opened in front of him like a judge's book. Greg looked rested. That bothered her before she knew why. Everyone else looked like they had slept badly. The chief financial officer said the bank wanted a revised guarantee letter before close of business. The general counsel said the client's attorney had requested written clarification about the estimate discrepancy. The operations director said subcontractors were calling because rumors had already reached the field. At the far end of the table, a young finance analyst named Marcy kept scrolling through spreadsheets with her shoulders tight. Meredith watched the numbers move across the screen. Steel escalation, mechanical package, crane rental, site concrete, labor contingency, subcontractor alternates. Each line had a reason beside it, but the reasons felt too polished, too ready, as if someone had written them before the questions were asked. Greg cleared his throat. We need to move decisively, he said. The longer we appear uncertain, the more exposed we become. Andrew Scott created the faulty estimate. We suspend him, document the failure, notify the bank that management has contained the issue, and replace the estimating team lead by Friday. The general counsel looked up. We should avoid language that sounds final before review. Greg smiled without warmth. Review what? His credentials were on the file. Meredith saw the file. Finance saw the file. We cannot let a mid-level estimator hold a $50 million project hostage with vague claims about timestamps. Meredith looked through the glass wall toward the office floor beyond. Estimators were already at their desks, heads bent low, pretending not to know their department had become the center of the storm. Andrew Scott's desk sat empty near the back row. She could see the faint square on the surface where his family photo had been. She remembered the little girl in the chair, Chloe, clutching a school notebook while grown adults turned her father into a corporate problem. Meredith pushed the thought away because feelings did not amend loan covenants. "What does the bank want exactly?" she asked. The chief financial officer adjusted his glasses. "They want assurance that the overrun is isolated, that cost controls have been reinforced, and that leadership has identified the responsible party." Greg answered before anyone else could. "Then we give them that. Not with a name until legal signs off," the general counsel said. Greg's eyes narrowed, just slightly. "If we sound hesitant, the bank may assume the estimate process is broken. If they assume the process is broken, they may pause the funding review. If they pause funding, the city gets nervous. If the city gets nervous, the press gets curious. We cannot afford softness." Meredith hated that he was using the right fears. The company had a fabrication yard on the south side with crews waiting on steel deliveries. It had field supervisors balancing schedules by the hour. It had union commitments, insurance requirements, permit deadlines, and a public client that did not tolerate surprises. One wrong signal could cost more than money. It could cost trust. By 10 o'clock, Meredith was in a bank conference room 30 floors above LaSalle Street, sitting across from 2 lending officers and a risk committee consultant who kept asking for documentation in a voice that sounded polite but not forgiving. Greg sat beside her, sliding folders forward before Meredith asked for them. He had prepared a clean packet: incident summary, revised cost exposure, employee access record, recommended corrective action. Andrew's name appeared on page 3. Meredith read it once and felt something in her chest go still. "This says Mr. Scott admitted process control gaps." The bank officer looked at her. "Did he?" Greg responded smoothly. He acknowledged the need for audit trail review, which is essentially the same thing. Meredith turned her head. "No, it is not." For the first time all morning, Greg did not answer immediately. The room noticed. He recovered with a small nod. "Of course, we can adjust the wording." Meredith kept her eyes on the packet. She could hear Andrew's voice from the day before, quiet but firm. "The cost escalation is hidden in the subcontractor alternates. The numbers are too clean. The timestamps will show it." Then she heard Chloe's voice in her memory, not from the conference room, but from the hallway as Andrew left. "What if I have proof?" Meredith had not been meant to hear that. The girl had whispered. The door had been almost closed. But Meredith had heard enough to make the words follow her home and into the next morning. Proof of what? A child's misunderstanding? A father's desperate hope? Or something the company had missed because everyone had been staring at the easiest person to blame? After the bank meeting, Greg walked beside Meredith through the lobby, speaking low. "You hesitated in there. I corrected language. You made us look divided. I made us look precise." Greg stopped near the revolving doors. "Meredith, I am trying to protect you." She looked at him then. He had served her father before he served her. He knew every board member, every old client, every lender who liked steak dinners and clean quarterly updates. He had survived recessions, lawsuits, labor disputes, and 3 failed expansions. He was useful. He was respected. He was also pushing too hard. "Are you?" she asked. His expression barely changed. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I want the complete file history by 5 o'clock. Not the summary. Not screenshots. The original logs." Greg's hand tightened on his portfolio. "That is a waste of time." "Then it will be a quick waste." He looked through the glass doors toward the street, then back at her. "Do not let Andrew Scott turn you against your own leadership team." Meredith did not answer. At 2:30, she drove to the fabrication yard, not because she needed to inspect steel beams herself, but because power looked different outside a boardroom. In the yard, the air smelled like cold metal, diesel, and sawdust from temporary framing crates. Workers in hard hats moved between marked sections of structural steel. A foreman showed her the delayed delivery board. Every delay had a cost. Every cost had a person attached to it. Meredith knew the names of lenders and lawyers, but she also knew that bad leadership reached all the way down to the person clocking out after 10 hours with sore hands and a family waiting at home. If the estimate really had been corrupted, then the lie was not just about money. It was about who would be forced to pay for someone else's protection. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. A message from Greg, termination letter ready. Recommend signature before board call. A second message followed seconds later. Also, do not engage with Scott if he contacts you. He may attempt to use his daughter for sympathy. Meredith stared at that sentence. Use his daughter. She saw Chloe's face again, the way the child had folded inward when the room laughed. She saw the phone in Chloe's hand. Not a toy. Not exactly. A phone held too tightly by a child who had heard something adults had not. Meredith returned to headquarters before 4. Her legal office was on the same floor as the executive suite, behind frosted glass and locked file cabinets. The general counsel, Paula Chun, had the termination letter open on her screen. Greg wants this signed before the board call, Paula said. I am not comfortable with the final wording. Why? Meredith asked. Because it says Andrew Scott caused the cost misstatement. We can say he is suspended pending review. We cannot say caused unless we prove it. What do we have? Paula leaned back. Credential record, file ownership, Greg's memo, finance summary. What do we not have? Paula looked at her carefully. Full audit trail. Native file comparison. Subcontractor communication chain. Device access sequence. Independent review. Meredith nodded once. Get all of it. Paula lowered her voice. Meredith, do you believe Andrew? Meredith walked to the window. The sun was dropping behind the skyline, turning the office glass gold. Far below, people moved through crosswalks with briefcases, backpacks, coffee cups, ordinary lives that did not know Lane Construction was deciding who would carry a $50 million lie. I believe we moved too fast, she said. Paula watched her. That is not the same answer. Before Meredith could respond, her assistant knocked and opened the door. Greg is in the investor room. The emergency board call started early. Meredith's face hardened. Without me. He said he was giving preliminary context. Meredith left the legal office at once. As she approached the investor room, she could hear Greg's voice through the door, calm, practiced, already shaping the story. The employee in question was emotionally unstable during the review and attempted to hide behind his child. We have reason to believe he may claim some informal recording exists, but there is no verified evidence that changes the financial facts. Meredith stopped with her hand on the door handle. Inside her pocket, her phone buzzed again. This time it was from Paula Chun. Do not sign anything. I just found a file access anomaly after Andrew's upload. Andrew Scott did not know that Meredith Lane had heard Greg Holt through the investor room door. He did not know that Paula Chun had found a file access anomaly. He did not know that for the first time since the glass conference room, the woman who had fired him was beginning to doubt the story she had been handed. All Andrew knew was that at 6:40 the next morning, before the sun had fully cleared the roofs across the street, his daughter Chloe was sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal, a school notebook, and her phone lying beside her like something too important to put away. The rent reminder still sat on Andrew's own phone. His employee access still showed suspended. His inbox had one new message from Lane Construction Legal. Mr. Scott, you are requested to appear at 10 o'clock this morning for a limited internal records review. You may bring any company-issued materials in your possession. Do not contact project stakeholders. Do not distribute confidential information. Failure to appear may affect final employment determination. Andrew read it twice while the coffee maker clicked and steamed. Chloe watched him over the rim of her cereal bowl. Are they going to say sorry? She asked. Andrew put the phone down carefully. Not yet. Are they going to listen? He looked at the cardboard box by the door, at the project notebooks stacked inside, at the cracked tape measure and the calculator with the faded buttons. They invited me because something did not add up. Chloe touched her school notebook. Numbers tell the truth. Only when people let them, Andrew said. At 8:15, he walked Chloe to school. The sky was gray, the sidewalk damp from overnight rain, and the crossing guard on Damon Avenue waved them through with a tired smile. Chloe had packed her phone in the front pocket of her backpack, but before she entered the school gate, she unzipped it and held it out. Should you take it? Andrew shook his head. No, it is your phone, but the voice note is about you. And you are a child, he said gently. I am not letting a company turn you into their evidence before I understand what is safe. Chloe looked down. But if I do not help, they will keep lying. Andrew crouched in front of her, ignoring the parents moving around them with backpacks, travel mugs, and morning impatience. You already helped by telling me. Now I have to be your dad before I am anything else." She nodded, but her eyes were serious in a way that made him ache. "Do not let them make you say you did it." "I will not, even if they are rich." Andrew smiled softly. "Especially then." At 10 o'clock, he entered Lane Construction through the side visitor entrance instead of the employee lobby. That small change told him everything. Yesterday, he had been staff. Today, he was a problem being managed. A receptionist gave him a temporary badge with visitor printed in red. Security directed him to a smaller conference room on the 29th floor, not the executive floor, not the glass room, not anywhere a person might feel equal. Inside, Meredith Lane sat at the head of the table with Paula Chun to her left, Greg Holt to her right, and two members of the finance team facing an empty chair. Meredith looked tired, though she had covered it well. Greg looked annoyed that Andrew had arrived on time. Paula's laptop was open, a legal pad beside it filled with tight handwriting. On the table lay a printed termination letter, and signed. Andrew noticed it before he sat down. Greg noticed that he noticed. "You are here for a records clarification," Greg said. "Not a debate." Andrew placed his old project notebook on the table. "I am here because your file is wrong." Meredith's eyes sharpened. Greg leaned forward. "Careful." Andrew did not look at him. He looked at Meredith. "The estimate shown yesterday was not the estimate I submitted. My version had the steel escalation at 8.4%, not 18. Crane rental was listed for 12 weeks, not 20. The subcontractor markup on mechanical alternates was 6%, not 16. And the contingency line was moved from owner review to base cost." One of the finance team members glanced down at his own paper. Meredith saw it. Greg did too. "Anyone can claim numbers after the fact," Greg said. Andrew opened his notebook. "These are my call logs with subcontractors. Dates, times, names, quoted ranges. These are my handwritten cross-checks. I also emailed a variance note to the estimating group at 6:18 in the evening before the final compilation." "That email was not in the packet," Paula said quietly. Greg waved a hand. "Because it was not relevant." Andrew turned one page. "It was relevant because I flagged the exact categories that changed." Meredith leaned back, expression unreadable. "Why did you not bring this up yesterday?" Andrew stared at her. "I did. You cut me off." The room went still. It was not loud. It was worse because it was true. Meredith's mouth tightened, and for 1 second Andrew saw the memory pass through her face. Him asking for the audit trail, her saying they had checked enough, Chloe sitting behind him with her pencil frozen over her notebook. Greg stepped in fast. "Andrew, let us not rewrite the meeting. You were emotional." Andrew looked at him then. "My daughter was crying because you mocked her. I made a comment about the situation. You made a comment about my child." Meredith raised one hand. "Enough." Andrew stopped, not because Greg was right, but because the word came from the person with power. Paula typed something. The finance analyst shifted in his seat. Greg pushed the termination letter 2 inches forward. "This is exactly the issue. He is personalizing a corporate failure. We need him to acknowledge process negligence, return all materials, and leave the matter to the company." Andrew looked at the letter. The language was careful and cruel. It did not say theft. It did not say fraud. It said failure to exercise professional care, unauthorized retention of project materials, and conduct inconsistent with company standards. If he signed it, he would not only lose his job, he would carry the lie into every future interview, every reference check, every quiet conversation where someone said he was not reliable enough for large work. He pushed the paper back. "I am not signing that." Greg's voice hardened. "Then you are refusing to cooperate." "No, I am refusing to confess to numbers I did not create." Meredith folded her hands. "Mr. Scott, you retained project records after suspension. I retained my own notebooks and printed backup reports from before suspension. I did not contact clients. I did not contact subcontractors. I did not distribute anything. You opened company files from home last night," Greg said. Andrew frowned. "No, I did not." Greg slid a printed access log across the table. "Your credentials accessed the Civic Center folder at 9:42 last night." Andrew read it once, then again. The room seemed to narrow. At 9:42 last night, he had been at his kitchen table copying Chloe's voice note, making grilled cheese, helping with long division, writing down what happened. His company laptop had been in the cardboard box by the door, closed, unplugged, and dead. That was not me, he said. Greg gave the smallest smile. Of course. Meredith watched Andrew's face carefully. Can you prove where you were? Andrew thought of Chloe at the table, the phone, the notebook, the copied voice note with its untouched timestamp. He thought of telling them then. He thought of placing his daughter's phone on this table in front of Greg Holt, who had already called her a shield. He thought of how fast-grown people could twist a child's mistake into misconduct if it served their story. So he said only, I was home with my daughter. Greg almost laughed. Convenient again. Paula looked at the access log. This login came from an internal network address, not his home. Greg's head turned. That can be clarified later. Andrew caught it. A tiny crack. A wrong note. He leaned forward. Why would my suspended credentials work from inside the building? Greg's face went blank for half a second. Meredith looked from Andrew to Greg. That is a fair question. Greg's tone sharpened. It is a distraction. He is an estimator trying to play investigator because he knows the numbers are indefensible. Andrew opened his folder and took out one printed page, the variance summary he had made before everything exploded. Then let me show the base cost sequence. If you compare my time-stamped version with the final packet, you will see the change cells are all in categories Greg controlled during partner review. Stop, Meredith said. The word landed hard. Andrew looked at her, stunned. You asked me here to clarify records. I asked you here to answer questions, not accuse a senior partner without a complete legal review. Andrew's voice stayed low. Meredith, the complete legal review is exactly what I asked for before you fired me in front of my daughter. Paula looked down. The finance analyst did not move. Greg's expression turned satisfied because Andrew had used her first name, because emotion could now be made to look like disrespect. Meredith stood. This meeting is suspended. Andrew rose slowly. You are making the same mistake twice. Her eyes flashed, not with cruelty, but with pressure sharpened into pride. And you are very close to being removed from this process entirely. Greg picked up the termination letter and tapped it against the table. You have until 5 o'clock today to sign acknowledgement of professional responsibility and return every company-related record in your possession. If you refuse, Lane Construction will proceed without your cooperation. Andrew put his notebook back into his folder. For a moment, he saw Chloe's small drawing in the margin of her school notebook, a phone with sound waves coming out of it. He saw the glowing voice note file on their kitchen table. He saw the access log with his name appearing inside a building where he had not been. Then he looked at Meredith Lane, the white female chief executive officer who had built a company powerful enough to erase him with one signature, and he said, At 5 o'clock, you will not need my confession. You will need the truth. Greg opened the door for him with a thin smile. Then bring something better than excuses. Andrew walked out wearing a visitor badge, carrying a folder full of records, and feeling the deadline tighten around him like a clock only one little girl's phone might be able to stop. Andrew left Lane Construction at 11:27 in the morning with a visitor badge in his pocket by accident and a 5 o'clock deadline sitting on his chest like a weight. He did not go home first. He walked 3 blocks to a public library branch where the heat was always too high. The carpet smelled faintly of dust, and nobody cared whether a man wore a suit from last season or carried his career in a worn leather folder. He sat at a corner computer where he could see the front door, set his notebook beside the keyboard, and took out his own phone. Chloe was at school. Her phone was in her backpack, powered off like Andrew had told her, but the copied voice note was safely stored in 3 places now. He had not wanted to listen to the whole thing without her, but he no longer had the luxury of avoiding pain. Greg Holt had put a deadline on him. Meredith Lane had let the deadline stand. If Andrew waited until 5 o'clock with nothing but anger, they would write the story without him. He plugged in his external drive, opened the save file, and put in one earbud. For several seconds, there was only soft room noise, the kind of ordinary sound a child's phone catches when it is lying on a school notebook. Paper shifting, Chloe breathing, a chair leg scraping, the distant chime from an elevator. Then Greg's voice came in low and clear enough to make Andrew's hand tighten around the mouse. Scott will take the fall. Poor single father. No lawyer. No leverage. Andrew closed his eyes. He had heard that part once at the kitchen table, but in the library it sounded different. Smaller, uglier, more deliberate. Greg was not guessing. He was choosing. The recording continued. Footsteps. A door opening. A woman's voice far away asking about a visitor badge. Then Greg again, more muffled now, as if he had turned toward the window. Move the markup into base cost. Keep the alternates clean. If anyone asks, the estimator merged the sheets wrong. Andrew leaned closer. His pulse kicked hard, but his face did not change. He had trained himself over years of estimating not to react too soon. A bad number could scare you. A strange number could tempt you. But the truth lived in details, and details punished people who rushed. He played the sentence again. Move the markup into base cost. Keep the alternates clean. If anyone asks, the estimator merged the sheets wrong. That was enough to raise questions, maybe enough to make Meredith pause. But Andrew heard something underneath it, something almost hidden by Greg's voice. A short burst of sound. 3 faint tones, like a loading dock signal, followed by a metallic roll. Andrew replayed 5 seconds. Then again. Then he opened the audio settings and slowed the playback speed. The public library computer was old and the software was basic, but it let him hear the background with more space between the sounds. 3 tones. A rolling gate. A forklift backup beep far below. Andrew sat very still. The hallway outside the executive conference rooms did not face the street. It faced the inner service corridor that overlooked Lane Construction's loading dock between the headquarters tower and the materials testing annex. Andrew knew that because he had spent 6 years walking those corridors to drop off bid binders, collect hard copy plans, and ask questions nobody important wanted to answer. The executive hallway had one place where you could hear the loading dock that clearly. The small alcove outside Partner Review Room B, near the restricted stairwell. That mattered because Greg had claimed in the morning meeting that Andrew's credentials accessed the Civic Center folder from inside the building at 9:42 the previous night. But the voice note placed Greg near Partner Review Room B before the public humiliation, and Greg had said the exact cost manipulation out loud. Andrew wrote it down in his notebook with the same care he used for steel quantities and concrete yardage. Background sound, loading dock triple tone. Possible location, Partner Review Room B alcove. Related access, Partner Review Station. He moved farther into the recording. Chloe's pencil scratched across paper. Someone laughed in the distance. A printer started, stopped, then started again. Andrew paused. A printer. Not the regular office printer hum. This was the heavy color plotter near the Partner Review suite. The one that made 2 clicks before it warmed up and a long sigh when paper fed through. Andrew had cursed that machine 100 times because it jammed on 11 by 17 sheets during bid days. He listened again. 2 clicks. Long sigh. Feed roller. Then Greg's voice. Use the revised sheet with Scott's header. Meredith will not check cell history if we give her a clean summary. Andrew felt the room tilt, but he kept writing. Not because he needed to remember the words. Because paper did not panic. Paper waited. He wrote every phrase, every timestamp on the recording, every background sound that located Greg near a machine only senior staff used after hours. This was the part everyone had missed. The voice note was not only a confession. It was a map. A child had captured what the adults would call context, and Andrew's low status was exactly why he recognized it. He knew the sound of the loading dock because he had carried boxes through it when partners did not want to wait for facilities. He knew the old plotter because he had stood beside it at midnight printing alternates for bids where his name never appeared on the cover page. He knew the difference between a lobby elevator chime and a service corridor chime because important people used one and people like him used the other. Hidden in Chloe's accidental recording was the geography of a lie. At 12:40, he received a call from Lane Construction Legal. Paula Chen's voice was professional but softer than yesterday. Mr. Scott, this is Paula Chen. I understand there is a 5 o'clock deadline. Before that deadline, do you have any records you want the company to preserve? Andrew looked at the audio file on the screen. He chose each word carefully. Yes. Preserve all access logs for Partner Review Room B, the restricted stairwell, and the plotter outside the partner suite for the last 72 hours. Preserve badge entries for senior partner Greg Holt. Preserve print jobs tied to the Civic Center estimate. Preserve any file opened from internal workstations after my suspension. There was a pause. That is very specific. Specific is the point. Another pause. Do you have a basis for those requests? Andrew looked at the library window, where buses sighed at the curb and people hurried by with lunch bags and umbrellas. I have a reason to believe the wrong person is being asked to sign the wrong document. Is that reason a recording? Andrew did not answer fast. It involves my daughter's phone, and I will not have her dragged into a corporate fight without clear handling from legal. Paula's voice changed by a fraction. Understood. Then she said, more quietly, Mr. Scott, Meredith needs something she can rely on before the board call. Andrew almost laughed, but there was no humor in him. Yesterday, she needed someone to blame before lunch. Paula did not defend Meredith. That told him something. Send me your preservation requests in writing, she said. No attachments yet. Just the list. I will. When the call ended, Andrew typed the requests in clean numbered lines, sent them from his personal email, and copied the message to himself. Then he sat back and listened to the final minutes of the recording, the part from inside the glass conference room. Meredith's voice came through, colder than he remembered. Greg's came through smoother. Chloe's breathing came through between them, small and uneven. Andrew pulled the earbud out for a moment because hearing his daughter afraid made the numbers blur. At 3:15, he picked Chloe up from school. She came out holding her notebook against her chest, phone now awake in her hand. Did they listen? She asked. Not yet. Did you? He nodded. Yes. Was it bad? Andrew looked at the school doors, the crossing guard, the line of parents, the ordinary world where children were supposed to worry about spelling tests and soccer practice, not corporate evidence. It was important. Chloe opened her notebook. In the margin beside her vocabulary words, she had drawn the same little phone with sound waves, but this time she had added a small square building beside it. I remembered something, she said. Before Mr. Holt said the mean part, there was a loud machine sound, like the printer near the big hallway, the one you said always jams. Andrew stared at the drawing. You remember where you were sitting? By the chairs near the room with the blue picture of the bridge. Mr. Holt was not in the main hallway. He was by the side door. Andrew's throat tightened. Partner review room B had a framed blue architectural rendering of a bridge outside it. He had not told her that. She had seen it. She had remembered it. And Greg had no idea a 9-year-old with a school notebook had drawn the location he was trying to hide. At 4:20, Andrew's phone rang again. This time it was not Paula. It was Meredith Lane. Her voice was controlled, guarded, and still touched with the old disbelief. Mr. Scott, I have been told you are making preservation requests based on something your daughter recorded. Andrew stood on the sidewalk outside the school while Chloe washed his face. That is correct. You understand an informal phone recording may not resolve a $50 million corporate matter. I understand that better than anyone in your building seems to think. Meredith went silent. Then she said, Greg says you are trying to distract from your own access log. Andrew looked at Chloe's notebook, at the small drawing of the phone, the side door, the bridge picture, the place where a lie had been careless because it thought a child did not count. Greg should be careful what he says before 5 o'clock, Andrew said. Meredith's tone cooled. Is that a threat? No, Andrew said. It is an estimate. By 4:30 that afternoon, Lane Construction stopped feeling like a company and started feeling like a building holding its breath. The investor room was full again, not with the polished confidence Meredith Lane preferred, but with open laptops, muted conference lines, half-empty coffee cups, and people speaking in careful voices because every sentence could become part of a legal record. On one screen, the bank's risk committee had placed the Civic Center funding under temporary hold. Not canceled, not defaulted, just held. But in construction, held was a dangerous word. Held meant crews could not be scheduled with confidence. Held meant materials could sit in a yard while prices moved. Held meant subcontractors started asking for deposits. Vendors tightened credit, and every small delay began charging interest against the future. Meredith stood at the head of the table with her arms folded, reading the bank notice for the third time. The language was clean and professional. Pending clarification of cost exposure and internal controls, disbursement review will remain paused. A paused disbursement on a $50 million disputed cost spread through a company faster than panic because payroll was only 8 days away. The fabrication yard needed a steel payment released by Friday, and the city client wanted written assurance before the next public meeting. Greg Holt sat 2 chairs down, speaking with the calm of a man who had brought matches to a dry field and now offered to sell water. This is why we need decisive action, he said. The bank wants a responsible party. The board wants containment. The city wants leadership. We give them Andrew Scott, close the personnel issue, and protect the institution. Paula Chun, the general counsel, looked up from her notes. That is not containment if the underlying file history is still unresolved. Greg barely glanced at her. The underlying file history points to Andrew's credentials. An internal network address used after his suspension, Paula said, which means either a system error, delegated access, or someone inside the building using credentials that should have been disabled. Greg's jaw moved once. Or it means Andrew had help. Meredith turned. From whom? We do not know yet. Then do not imply it. Greg leaned back, measuring her. Meredith, with respect, hesitation is becoming expensive. The chief financial officer looked miserable because he knew Greg was not wrong about the pressure. The bank asked whether we can certify the estimate chain by tomorrow morning. If we cannot, they may extend the hold. If that happens, we need to use operating cash for the fabrication deposit or postpone the yard schedule. Postpone how long? Meredith asked. 5 business days at minimum. The operations director shook his head. 5 business days pushes the structural package into next month. The yard cannot carry idle shifts that long. We would either reassign crews or send people home temporarily. No one liked that phrase. Send people home. It sounded soft in a conference room and brutal in a household. Meredith saw faces in her mind from the fabrication yard that afternoon. Welders, drivers, clerks, apprentices, supervisors, people whose names never appeared in investor packets. She had built her career promising that lane construction kept jobs moving. Now a number on a screen threatened to stop them. Greg opened his portfolio and slid forward a revised crisis plan. It was too ready, again. Meredith noticed that, but the room was already hungry for an answer. Step 1, Greg said. Terminate Andrew Scott for professional negligence and unauthorized retention of materials. Step 2, appoint an interim estimating review led by my office. Step 3, issue a bank letter confirming leadership action and updated controls. Step 4, offer the city a revised cost review timeline under partner supervision. Paula tapped her pen. You want your office to lead the review of an estimate where your approval layer is under question. Greg smiled thinly. My approval layer is not under question. Andrew's accusations are under question. Andrew requested preservation of partner review room be access logs, print jobs, and badge records. Because he is trying to create noise. Because he named locations before our internal anomaly report was circulated. That made the room quiet. Meredith looked at Paula. Explain. Paula's voice stayed even. Mr. Scott asked us to preserve logs from partner review room B and the plotter outside the partner suite. Our preliminary system review shows the final Civic Center estimate was printed from that plotter after Andrew's original upload and before the executive packet was built. Greg gave a short laugh. Of course it was printed. We print review packets. Using a workstation associated with partner credentials, Paula said. Not Andrew's. Greg's eyes hardened. Partner credentials are shared for administrative convenience during review cycles. That is not misconduct. It is poor control. Poor control is not fraud. Meredith raised a hand before the argument could sharpen. Where is information technology? A senior information technology manager, Evan Rowe, joined from the far end of the table. He looked like a man wishing he had chosen a different day to wear a blue tie. We are pulling logs now, but I need to be clear. Some of the legacy estimating tools do not preserve cell-by-cell history unless versioning was enabled on the shared drive. Meredith stared at him. Was it enabled? For the estimator folder, yes. For partner review exports, not consistently. Greg spread his hands. So we are chasing shadows while the bank freezes funding. Evan hesitated. There is more. An automated document summary tool was used to generate part of the revised cost narrative. Meredith frowned. Automated how? An artificial intelligence drafting tool licensed for internal summaries. It appears someone fed it the modified cost lines and asked it to create a management explanation. The chief financial officer closed his eyes. Paula wrote something down fast. Meredith felt the room tilt toward a deeper problem. Was confidential client data entered? We are still checking, Evans said. The prompt history may include project identifiers and subcontractor names. Greg cut in. That has nothing to do with Andrew. Paula looked at him. It has everything to do with the crisis plan if the bank or city asks whether our revised explanation was independently verified. Meredith turned to Greg. Did your office use the artificial intelligence tool? Greg did not blink. My team uses approved tools like every executive office in America. That was not my question. Then ask a better one. The words landed too sharply. Several people looked down. Greg softened his tone at once. Meredith, I am not the enemy here. A suspended estimator is feeding legal just enough technical language to slow us down while our lender loses patience. That is the play. Delay, confuse, claim whistleblower status, and hope the company pays him to go away. Meredith wanted that to be impossible. She wanted Andrew Scott to be what Greg said he was because that story had a shape she could manage. One low-level failure. One termination. One corrected packet. One bank letter. But there was Chloe's phone. There was the side hallway. There was the print job. There was the sentence Meredith had overheard Greg say to the board. He may claim some informal recording exists. How had Greg known about a recording before Andrew gave legal details? The question rose in Meredith's mind, but she did not ask it yet. Greg was watching her too closely. At 5 minutes before 5, Andrew's email arrived. Paula opened it on the room display after Meredith nodded. It was short, clean, and specific. He did not attach the voice note. He did not threaten the company. He listed preservation requests by time window, location, device type, and file category. He requested that any review include his original estimate upload, version history, partner review exports, print logs, badge entries, internal network access, and communications related to the modified markup. At the bottom, one line made Meredith read twice. I will not sign any acknowledgement that contradicts the records, and I will not expose my daughter to questioning until the company agrees in writing that she will be treated as a minor witness, not a participant in any alleged misconduct. Paula said, that is carefully written. Greg said, it is coached. By whom? Paula asked. Someone trying to make him look innocent. Meredith kept reading the line about Chloe. Not a participant. A minor witness. Andrew Scott, a man with rent due Friday and no badge on his belt, was still thinking first about the child who had watched him be humiliated. Her own company had not done that. Meredith felt the sting of it, but buried it beneath the louder pressure in the room. The bank wanted a name. The board wanted action. The yard needed money. The city wanted assurance. Greg wanted her signature. The termination letter sat beside her laptop, clean and waiting. At 5:12, the emergency board call began. Faces appeared on the large screen, some from offices, one from an airport lounge, one from a home study with framed degrees behind him. Greg presented first because he had prepared slides. Meredith led him, and every minute she let him speak, the story hardened. He described Andrew as suspended, non-compliant, defensive, and in possession of unverified material involving his child's phone. He emphasized operational risk. He emphasized lender anxiety. He emphasized that delay could trigger cost escalation beyond the original overrun. Then he offered a solution: immediate termination for cause, partner-led remediation, bank assurance letter before midnight. A board member asked, "Do we have any evidence this estimator acted intentionally?" Greg answered, "We have evidence that his credentials are tied to the defective file and post-suspension access." Paula said, "That statement requires qualification." Greg talked over her. "The qualification is that legal always wants more time. The business does not have more time." Meredith watched the board faces. They were not cruel people. They were frightened people with fiduciary duties and reputations to protect. Frightened, powerful people often made the same mistake. They mistook speed for courage. The chairman looked at Meredith. "Meredith, your recommendation?" The room waited. Paula looked at her with warning in her eyes. Evan looked at the table. The chief financial officer looked like he wanted someone else to answer. Greg looked directly at her, steady and confident, because he believed she would choose the company's appearance over one estimator's dignity. Meredith thought of Andrew saying, "You are making the same mistake twice." She thought of Chloe's phone glowing in a child's hand. She thought of the fabrication yard and the bank hold and the city client and the old lane name on the building. Then she made the choice that would cost her more than she understood. "Proceed with the bank assurance letter," Meredith said. "State that Andrew Scott has been suspended pending final termination review, that partner-level remediation is underway, and that lane construction considers the cost event contained." Paula closed her eyes for 1 second. Greg gave no smile, but victory moved through his face like a shadow. The chairman nodded. And the recording? Meredith's voice was firm, almost cold. Until verified through proper channels, it does not alter our position. In a small apartment across town, Andrew stood at the kitchen counter with Chloe beside him, watching no reply come back from Lane Construction. Chloe's school notebook lay open to her drawing of the phone, the side door, and the Blue Bridge picture. On Andrew's laptop, the voice note file sat untouched, still holding every sound from the hallway. At 5:29, his email refreshed. A message from Paula Chen appeared, only one sentence long. The company is moving forward tonight. Andrew read it once. Chloe looked up at him. Does that mean they still do not believe you? Andrew looked at the voice note, then at his daughter's careful drawing, then at the deadline that had just passed. It means, he said quietly, they are about to put the lie in writing. At 8:02 the next morning, Andrew Scott was called back to Lane Construction for what the email described as a final employment conference. But the moment he stepped out of the elevator with Chloe beside him, he understood the truth. This was not a conference. It was a public ending. The main lobby had been rearranged for an emergency staff briefing, with employees standing shoulder to shoulder near the security desk, project managers gathered by the elevators, finance staff lined along the marble wall, and several board members visible behind the glass doors of the investor room. Meredith Lane stood at the front in a dark suit, her face controlled, her hands folded over a thin folder. Senior partner Greg Holt stood beside her with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had already written the last line. Andrew had brought Chloe only because school had another delayed start, and the neighbor who sometimes watched her was working a morning shift. Chloe wore her backpack and held her school notebook against her chest. Her phone was tucked inside the front pocket, fully charged, the saved voice note untouched, its small existence unknown to almost everyone in that lobby. Andrew leaned down and whispered, "Stay close to me." Chloe nodded, but her eyes had already found the faces staring at her father. Meredith did not look at Chloe at first. She looked at Andrew as if distance could make what she was about to do cleaner. "Mr. Scott," she said, and the lobby settled into silence. Lane Construction has completed its preliminary review. Based on the available records, your employment is terminated effective immediately for professional negligence, failure to follow cost control procedures, and unauthorized retention of project materials. The words were formal, but they landed like stones. Andrew felt Chloe grip the back of his coat. He kept his voice even. "That review is incomplete." Greg gave a small sigh, loud enough for people near him to hear. "Andrew, this is not the time for another performance." Someone near the coffee bar whispered, "Is that the estimator?" Someone else said, "The $50 million guy." Chloe heard it. Her fingers tightened around her notebook until the cardboard cover bent. Andrew turned his head just enough to see her face. Her lower lip shook, but she did not cry. That hurt worse. Meredith opened the folder. "You were given an opportunity to cooperate by 5 o'clock yesterday. Instead, you refused to sign acknowledgement, retained confidential materials, and attempted to redirect the inquiry towards senior leadership without presenting verified evidence." Andrew looked directly at her. "I asked you to preserve evidence, and legal will determine what is relevant. You let Greg determine what was convenient." A low murmur moved through the lobby. Meredith's face sharpened. "Careful, Mr. Scott." Greg stepped forward before she could say more. "This company has carried people like Andrew for years. People who do decent small work, then collapse when the responsibility gets larger than they are." The lobby went still in a different way now. It was no longer just business. It was a lesson being delivered from a high floor to everyone below it. "I did not collapse," Andrew said. "I checked the numbers." Greg smiled. "You opened files you had no authority to open. The access log you were using came from inside this building after my suspension. So now the building framed you too?" A few nervous laughs broke out. Chloe stepped half a step forward. Andrew moved one hand back, not pushing her away, only reminding her to wait. Meredith saw the gesture and misread it. "Mr. Scott, do not involve your daughter in this." Andrew's eyes flashed with pain, but his voice stayed quiet. "I brought her because I am a single father and her school opened late. You involved her when you humiliated me in front of her the first time." The sentence hung in the lobby. For 1 second, Meredith's mouth closed. For 1 second, the chief executive officer looked like a person who remembered a child's pencil rolling across the carpet. Then Greg spoke again, smooth and hard. Security will collect your visitor badge and escort you out. The word escort made Chloe flinch. Andrew turned fully toward her. Look at me, sweetheart. She looked up. Are you a fraud? The question came out small, not because she believed it, but because the lobby had filled her ears with the word. Andrew crouched in front of her, not caring who watched. No, I am your dad. I am an estimator. And I told the truth. Chloe swallowed. Numbers tell the truth. Yes. And phones remember too. Andrew froze for half a breath. Behind him, Greg's eyes narrowed. Meredith heard it, and so did Paula Chun, standing near the investor room door with a legal pad in her hand. Andrew rose slowly. We are leaving now. The security guard, embarrassed, held out a hand for the visitor badge. Andrew gave it to him. No argument. No scene. No begging. He picked up the cardboard envelope of final paperwork, took Chloe's hand, and walked toward the revolving doors while dozens of employees watched a man lose his name in public. As he passed the estimating department, a senior project manager muttered, should have stayed in residential bids. Greg heard it and smiled. Chloe heard it and wrote something fast in her notebook while walking, the pencil moving in short, angry strokes. Outside, the morning air was cold enough to sting. Andrew guided her to the sidewalk, away from the building cameras, and only then did he breathe like the room had been holding his lungs. Chloe pulled out her phone. Dad, we have to play it. Andrew shook his head. Not on the sidewalk. They called you a fraud. I know. They made everyone hear it. I know. Then why can they say things out loud? And we have to be careful. Andrew looked back at the tower, at the silver letters spelling Lane Construction above the doors. Because the truth has to survive longer than their lie. Inside the building, the relief lasted 14 minutes. Greg led Meredith, Paula, the chief financial officer, and the board's audit chair into the investor room to finalize the bank assurance letter. The letter stated that the responsible employee had been terminated, the matter had been contained, and a partner-led remediation process had begun. The bank was waiting. Payroll was waiting. The fabrication yard was waiting. Meredith signed the first page, then paused before the second. Paula noticed. Greg noticed too. We cannot keep stopping at the edge of every decision, he said. The longer we hesitate, the weaker we look. Meredith's pen hovered. What did Andrew mean about the internal access? Greg's answer came too quickly. A desperate deflection. Paula opened her laptop. I asked information technology to pull the badge and device logs overnight. They are incomplete, but there is one issue. Greg turned toward her. Paula. No. The company is about to certify containment to a lender. We need accuracy. She clicked the file open. At 9:42, the Civic Center folder was accessed from a workstation near Partner Review Room B. Andrew Scott's credentials appeared, but Andrew's badge had been deactivated the previous afternoon. There is no record of his physical entry. The audit chair leaned forward. Could remote access create that? Not from that workstation, Paula said. The chief financial officer rubbed his forehead. Then who used the workstation? No one answered. Greg's jaw tightened. Old systems cross-map credentials. It happens. At the far end of the table, Marcy, the junior finance analyst who had been quiet through every meeting, lifted one hand halfway, then put it down. Meredith saw it. Marcy, speak. Marcy's face reddened. She was 24, maybe 25, with a company laptop covered in audit stickers and a yellow legal pad full of numbers. It may be nothing. Greg sighed. Then perhaps we stay focused. Meredith looked at him, then back at Marcy. Say it. Marcy turned her laptop around. Andrew Scott's preservation email mentioned the plotter outside Partner Review Room B. I thought that was oddly specific, so I checked the principal records. There was a print job at 6:58 the evening before the executive packet. File name matches the revised estimate export. User field is blank because the plotter cache resets, but the workstation identifier matches the one from the 942 access. Paula nodded slowly. That supports Andrew's location theory. Greg gave a cold laugh. Location theory based on what? A child's phone. Marcy swallowed. Maybe, but that is the part one wanted to mention. Meredith's eyes fixed on her. What part? Marcy opened a small audio spectrogram window on her screen. I was not trying to authenticate anything. I only had the short sample description from legal notes, not the recording itself. But Andrew listed background sounds in his preservation request. Triple dock tone. Plotter warm-up. Service corridor chime. Those are not guesses a random person would make. Greg looked furious now. He worked here. Of course he knows sounds. Yes, Marcy said, gaining a little courage. But he named the Blue Bridge picture too. Paula looked up. He did not mention that in the email. His daughter did, Marcy said. At the lobby doors, I heard her say. The phone remembered the bridge hallway. I went to check because there is only one blue bridge rendering near a partner room. Meredith felt the room shrink around that sentence. Chloe had noticed the place. Andrew had noticed the sounds. The experts had spent a full day reading summaries, while a child's school notebook and a low-status estimator had mapped the path of the file. The audit chair turned to Greg. Were you in partner review room B that evening? Greg's expression changed only a little, but Meredith had known him long enough to see the calculation. I moved through many rooms during a crisis. Paula asked, did you use the plotter? I do not track every print job personally. Marcy looked back at her screen. There is one more thing. Greg stood. This is absurd. Meredith's voice cut through the room. Sit down, Greg. He remained standing for 1 second too long, then lowered himself into the chair. Marcy clicked another tab. The artificial intelligence summary tool generated the bank narrative from a spreadsheet export. The export properties show a source path. It was not Andrew's estimator folder. It came from a partner review folder. The room went completely silent. The chief financial officer whispered, that means the modified file was upstream of the bank packet. Paula said, and downstream of partner review. Meredith stared at the unsigned second page of the assurance letter. Through the investor room glass, she could see the lobby where Andrew had stood minutes earlier, where his daughter had asked whether he was a fraud because the company had made her hear the word. Meredith's pen rolled slightly under her fingers. The bank line blinked on hold. Greg's remediation plan sat in front of her. The fired estimator was already outside. The little girl with the phone was gone. And for the first time, the room full of experts understood that the most important evidence in a $50 million crisis might have left the building in a child's backpack. By 9:46 that morning, the crisis at Lane Construction had escaped the room. A local business reporter had posted that funding for the West Side Civic Center was under review after a major cost irregularity, and within 20 minutes the story moved through City Hall, subcontractor offices, job site trailers, and phones in the fabrication yard. Nobody outside the company knew the full truth yet, so everyone filled the silence with fear. Workers wondered if Friday checks would clear. Suppliers asked whether delivery schedules were still valid. The bank requested a live executive update before noon. The city client demanded a written explanation by the end of the day. Meredith Lane stood in the investor room staring at 3 screens at once. The bank call waiting, the board chat filling with questions, and the draft assurance letter that now looked less like protection and more like a mistake with her signature on it. Across the table, Greg Holt kept his voice calm, but his hands had stopped being still. This is exactly why Andrew Scott had to be removed, he said. The rumor cycle is feeding on hesitation. We need to send the letter now and state clearly that the employee responsible has been terminated. Paula Chin did not look up from her laptop. We cannot state that while the file path points into partner review. Greg turned on her. A file path is not motive. Marcy, the junior finance analyst, sat at the far end with her shoulders tight and her notes open. She had mapped the print job, the partner review folder, and the artificial intelligence summary source path in 3 columns, each one pointing away from Andrew and closer to the suite where senior people worked behind badge-locked doors. Evan from Information Technology had added his own finding. Andrew's credentials had been used through an internal workstation after his badge was disabled, which meant the credential record was not proof of physical access. The experts had models, logs, spreadsheets, and policies. What they did not have was the one thing Andrew had said existed. The sound of the truth, recorded by a child before anyone knew they needed it. Meredith's phone vibrated. A message from the bank relationship manager. We need the certified narrative by 11:30 or the hold extends to next week. Next week meant the fabrication deposit would miss its release window. Next week meant the steel yard could pause. Next week meant a public construction project tied to jobs, contracts, and city trust could become a political crisis by dinner. Greg pointed at the message as if it proved him right. There, that is real pressure. Not a little girl's phone. Not Andrew's wounded pride. Real pressure. Meredith looked at him. Why did you know about the recording before legal knew? The investor room went quiet. Greg blinked once. What? Yesterday on the board call, before Andrew gave Paula any detail, you said he may claim some informal recording exists. How did you know? Greg's face hardened just a fraction. Because he made a comment leaving the building. His daughter made a comment. Everybody heard something. Not everybody heard the word recording, Paula said. I reviewed my notes. You used that word first. Greg looked from Paula to Meredith, then gave the smallest laugh. This is ridiculous. We are entertaining theories from a fired estimator and a frightened child while a bank holds our funding. Meredith did not answer. She picked up her phone and called Andrew Scott. He answered after the second ring. His voice was quiet, guarded, and tired. Meredith. She heard a school hallway in the background, then a door closing. Mr. Scott, I need you to come back to Lane Construction. You fired me in front of my daughter less than 2 hours ago. I know. You let your senior partner call me a fraud in a lobby. I know. Then why would I come back? Meredith looked through the glass, toward the employees gathered below, toward the building her name was on, toward the draft letter that could turn a bad judgment into a formal falsehood. Because the company is about to certify a narrative to the bank and the city. If that narrative is wrong, people who had nothing to do with this could pay for it. Payroll, the yard, the project team, subcontractors. I am asking you to help us stop the wrong paper from leaving this room. There was a pause. When Andrew spoke again, his voice had less anger than she deserved. I am not coming for my ego. I understand. I am not bringing Chloe in as a spectacle. Meredith closed her eyes briefly. I understand that too. She is at school. She should stay there. Can you bring the copied recording without her? Yes, but I want written confirmation from legal that the original phone stays with Chloe, that she will not be contacted directly, and that the recording will be reviewed as evidence from a minor witness, not as misconduct. Paula was already typing. You will have it before you arrive, Meredith said. And Meredith? Yes. If Greg is in the room, he does not speak to me. Not once. Meredith looked at Greg, who was watching her like a man watching a door close. Agreed. At 10:48, Andrew Scott entered the same building that had just thrown him out. He wore the same suit, but the visitor badge on his coat did not make him smaller this time. He carried no cardboard box, no angry sign, no dramatic speech. Just a worn leather folder, a small external drive, and a printed chain of custody note he had written at his kitchen table. Chloe was not with him, but her presence arrived before he did. In the phone recording copied from her device. In the school notebook page photographed with her drawing of the bridge hallway. In the careful way Andrew placed every item on the investor room table like he was setting down something heavier than technology. Meredith stood when he entered. Greg stayed seated. Paula slid a written confirmation across the table first. Andrew read every line. Minor witness. No direct contact without parent or counsel. Original device remains with family unless subpoenaed or voluntarily produced under agreement. No adverse inference against the child. Only after reading it twice did Andrew nod. The original voice note is on Chloe's phone, he said. This is an unchanged copy made last night, with the file creation date preserved. I also brought my notes identifying background sounds and locations. I am not claiming this alone proves everything. I am saying it tells you where to look. Greg scoffed under his breath. Andrew did not look at him. Meredith did. You agreed not to speak to him. Greg leaned back, lips pressed tight. Paula connected the external drive to a clean review laptop. Evan opened an audio window and projected only the waveform and timestamp, not Chloe's personal phone information. Marcy placed the building floor map beside her own print log table. The bank call continued waiting on another screen, the red timer counting upward. Outside the room, staff whispered. Inside, nobody moved. Andrew stood beside the table, hands folded, not like a fired man begging for mercy, but like an estimator waiting for a number to be checked correctly. Start at 2 minutes and 12 seconds, he said. Paula clicked play. At first, there was only the soft rustle of paper and Chloe's small breathing. Then came Greg's voice, low and impatient. Scott will take the fall. Poor single father. No lawyer. No leverage. The room changed. Nobody spoke. Nobody even shifted. Greg's face went pale with anger, but he stayed silent because Meredith's eyes were on him. The recording continued. A service corridor chime sounded in the background, followed by 3 faint dock tones and the long mechanical sigh of a printer warming up. Andrew pointed to Marcy's map. That sound is not the executive hallway. It is the service side near partner review room B. The plotter there makes 2 clicks before feeding 11 by 17 paper. Listen. 2 clicks came through the speakers. Then Greg's voice again. Move the markup into base cost. Keep the alternates clean. If anyone asks, the estimator merged the sheets wrong. The chief financial officer whispered, "My God." Meredith did not move. Andrew looked at the waveform, not at her. Now 9 seconds later. Paula let it play. Greg's voice returned, clearer this time. Use the revised sheet with Scott's header. Meredith will not check cell history if we give her a clean summary. The room went so still the bank call alert seemed loud. Marcy slowly turned her laptop around, matching the audio timestamp with the print spool record. Evan added the workstation identifier. Paula highlighted the partner review folder path. One by one, the expert pieces moved into place around the voice of a man who had believed a child's phone did not matter. Greg finally stood. This is out of context. Meredith's voice was quiet. Sit down. You cannot use a child's accidental recording as the basis for destroying a senior partner. Andrew turned to him for the first time. You used a single father's name as the basis for saving yourself. Greg opened his mouth, but no words came out cleanly. Meredith looked at the assurance letter on the table, then at Andrew's termination paperwork, then at the paused bank call. The public crisis had almost forced her to choose speed over truth. Andrew had come back not to win, not to gloat, not to punish her in the room where she deserved it, but to stop a lie from becoming official. Paula spoke first. We need to suspend the bank letter, preserve all partner review materials, notify the board audit chair, and place Greg on administrative leave pending investigation. Greg stared at Meredith. After everything I have done for this company, you are going to believe him? Meredith looked at Andrew, then at the waveform still glowing on the screen, then at the sentence that would follow her for the rest of her career. Power talks first. Proof talks last. The room goes silent. And in that silence, the $50 million lie finally had a voice. Meredith Lane did not send the bank assurance letter. For 10 full seconds after the recording stopped, nobody in the investor room moved. The bank line kept blinking on the screen. The board audit chair waited on mute. The city deadline still stood. The fabrication yard still needed its deposit. Payroll was still 8 days away. But the room had changed because the lie had finally been given a voice, and that voice had not come from a lawyer, a consultant, or a senior executive. It had come from a daughter's voice note recording on phone, saved by a child who had been told to sit quietly while powerful adults shamed her father. Meredith looked at Greg Holt, and for the first time in years, she did not see experience. She saw calculation. Greg's face had lost its polished confidence. Meredith, he said, do not make a permanent decision from an emotional recording. Meredith's answer was low and clear. You made a permanent accusation from a false file. Greg looked around the table, searching for someone to support him, but the numbers had turned. Marcy had the print log. Evan had the workstation identifier. Paula Chun had the preservation request and the partner review folder path. Andrew Scott had the original estimate notes, the background sound map, and the steady patience of a project estimator who had spent his life proving truth one detail at a time. Meredith closed the unsigned bank letter and turned it face down. Paula, notify the board audit chair that the prior narrative is withdrawn pending independent review. Evan, lock the partner review folder, preserve all logs, and suspend all shared credential access. Marcy, package your findings with chain of custody. Greg Holt is relieved of project authority effective immediately. Greg stood so fast his chair rolled back against the wall. You cannot do this. Meredith looked at him without blinking. I just did. I built this company with your father. No, she said. You worked here. There is a difference. Paula opened the investor room door and quietly asked security and human resources to step in, not as a spectacle, not as revenge, but as procedure. Greg was placed on administrative leave pending board review, independent audit, and legal process. His company laptop, badge access, and project authority were frozen before he left the floor. He did not get dragged out. He did not get shouted at. He got something worse for a man who had hidden behind status, a documented process that did not care how expensive his suit was. Andrew watched silently. There was no victory on his face. Only relief, and even that was cautious, because he knew a restored name did not erase what Chloe had heard in that lobby. Meredith turned to him. For a moment, the title on her office door seemed too small for the apology she owed. "Mr. Scott," she said, "I was wrong." Andrew did not answer. She continued anyway, because this time he should not have to ask. "I judged you before I checked the records. I let pressure make me careless. I let a senior title weigh more than your work. And I humiliated you in public, in front of your daughter. I cannot repair that privately." 30 minutes later, every employee who had watched Andrew be fired was asked to return to the lobby. The same marble floor, the same security desk, the same coffee bar, the same executives along the glass wall. But this time Meredith Lane stood alone at the front, without Greg Holt beside her. Andrew Scott stood near the side, still in his worn suit, still holding his leather folder. Chloe was not there. Andrew had refused to pull her from school for a corporate apology, and Meredith had accepted that refusal without argument. The employees whispered until Meredith raised one hand. "This morning," she said, "Lane Construction terminated Andrew Scott based on an incomplete and inaccurate review. That decision was wrong." The lobby went still. Meredith did not soften the words. "Mr. Scott did not create the cost irregularity. The current evidence shows his estimate was altered after submission through a partner-level review process. His request for audit trail preservation was accurate. His refusal to sign a false acknowledgement was professional. His conduct protected this company when this company failed to protect him." Andrew looked down once, then back up. Meredith turned toward him in front of everyone. "Andrew Scott is restored effective immediately, with full back pay for the suspension period, written correction of his employment record, and formal credit for identifying the estimate manipulation. He will report directly to the independent recovery audit team, not to any partner office." A murmur moved through the room, not gossip this time, but recognition. The senior project manager who had mocked him near the coffee bar stared at the floor. The finance employees looked at Marcy, who stood at the edge of the crowd, pale but proud. Meredith continued, "We will also change our controls. No partner will be allowed to override cost files without traceable review. No shared credentials will remain active in estimating or partner review. No employee, regardless of title, will be named responsible for a financial event without documented evidence. And no child will ever again be used as background scenery while adults take away a parent's dignity." Andrew felt that last sentence land where the earlier words had wounded him. Not fixed, but seen. That afternoon, the corrected narrative went to the bank and the city. It did not pretend the company had been perfect. It said the opposite. It admitted that the internal review had found evidence of partner-level manipulation, that the estimator originally blamed had raised valid concerns, and that an independent audit and legal review were underway. The bank did not release every hold at once, but it allowed a limited disbursement for payroll and critical yard operations while the audit continued. The fabrication deposit moved under review controls. The city agreed to a revised documentation timeline. The company did not escape consequences, but it avoided turning a lie into official truth. Over the next week, Greg Holt was removed from all client-facing authority. The board hired outside auditors. Legal counsel preserved his emails, badge records, print logs, artificial intelligence tool history, and project communications. The review found altered spreadsheets, misleading summary language, and approval steps hidden behind executive access. Greg faced board action, loss of partnership status, and referral for further legal review. Meredith did not celebrate it. She signed every corrective document with a face that showed she understood leadership was not about never being wrong. It was about what you did when the proof made your pride impossible to keep. Andrew returned to work 3 days later, but not to the same desk. Meredith offered him a private office. He declined. He chose a glass cubicle near the estimating team, visible from the floor, because he wanted younger employees to know that careful work could survive politics. On his first morning back, someone left a new calculator on his desk with a note that said, "Welcome back." Marcy brought him the updated audit schedule. Paula handed him the corrected employment letter. Meredith came last. "How is Chloe?" she asked. Andrew looked at the framed photo he had placed back on his desk, the one where Chloe was missing one front tooth. "She is better," he said. "But she asked why adults need proof before they believe a good person." Meredith swallowed. What did you tell her? I told her adults get scared, and scared people sometimes trust power before truth. Meredith nodded slowly. Tell her I am sorry. You can tell her yourself someday, Andrew said. Not as a chief executive officer, as a person who means it. That evening, Andrew picked Chloe up from school. She came out with her backpack, her phone, and her school notebook pressed against her chest. Did they fix it? She asked. They started, he said. Is Mr. Holt still there? Not on the project. Did Mississippi Lane say sorry? Andrew smiled faintly. In front of everyone. Chloe looked relieved, but not excited. Children understand fairness differently than adults. They do not think an apology is a prize. They think it is something that should have happened before the hurt. At home, Andrew made grilled cheese again because Chloe said it tasted like the night the truth stayed safe. After dinner, she placed her phone on the kitchen table beside her school notebook. The voice note was still there, backed up, documented, protected. Andrew opened a small envelope and wrote the date on it. Then he copied the evidence information onto a sheet for his records and placed the external drive inside. Chloe watched carefully. Are we keeping it forever? We are keeping it as long as we need to. Because he lied? Because your dignity matters, Andrew said. And so does mine. Chloe touched the edge of the envelope. I did not record it to get revenge. I know. I was just doing my reading homework. Andrew looked at his daughter, at the school notebook with the bent corner, at the phone that had carried more truth than a room full of executives, and he felt the quiet weight of what she had protected without even knowing how big it was. Sometimes, he said, doing the ordinary right thing catches the extraordinary wrong thing. Chloe thought about that, then opened her notebook and wrote one sentence under her math homework. Andrew did not read it until she slid the notebook across the table. In careful pencil, she had written, "My dad did not need to be powerful. He only needed to be honest." Andrew folded the envelope, placed it in the top drawer, and closed it gently. The voice note was no longer a weapon. It was a reminder. Power may speak loudly at first, but truth does not need a corner office to be heard. It only needs one brave voice, one clean record, and someone who refuses to let dignity be priced lower than a lie.